Hello, today's guest is Katie. Katie Pannell is a devoted cat mom moonlighting as a naming strategist and fractional chief creative officer. With her triple threat approach combining messaging strategy, conceptual positioning, and humor, Katie has named everything from brands to bands to beauty and baby products, and that's just her B list. Working with personal brands and e-commerce companies, Katie's here to make you look good, sound good, and get your brand the attention and recognition it deserves. In this episode, we discuss the psychology of naming, methods to come up with your own effective and innovative names, and whether or not clear or clever names are better. But before I dive in, I just have to say I actually hired Katie a few months ago to help me name a new business that I am starting, and she was absolutely fantabulous. And I knew I had to get her on the podcast as soon as possible to share all things naming with you. So, with all that being said, I hope you enjoy. Hello, I have Katie here with me, and I am so excited to bring her on. I had the opportunity to work with her a few months ago for a project that I'm not going to talk too much about right now because it's still under wraps, but a new business that I am launching, and I had her help me name that company, which I'm so excited about. And I was just absolutely blown away by the entire process and how she has been able to build a business in this very niche market, but it's also something that is so needed in the online space. So I'm so excited to have you here, Katie. Can you walk us through a little bit more about your entrepreneur story? Like, how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, great question. Thank you for having me. Just got to get that out of the way first. But long story short, I started in marketing in general, just general marketing services. Then I niched to copywriting. Then I niched to naming. So I have been all the way around the block with all things to do with words, letters.
I love that. I love that. And what timeline? Are we talking like you did this in a year? Are we talking like 10
Oh,
years?
yeah.
What is your timeline here?
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, to quote Taylor Swift. I started my business, my first iteration of my business back in like 2017, and I was just doing general marketing, consulting, that kind of stuff. I niched to copy in 2019, and then I niched to naming at the tail end of like 2022, 2023-ish. And then this year, it's just been absolutely insane. I think I'm over close to 35 naming clients this year. Like, it's been crazy. So
That's amazing. And what was that moment for you when you were like, okay, I'm going to niche down all the way to naming? Because that is what I would honestly consider more of a micro niche. And was there any fear of like when you were niching down that far, what if this doesn't work out? What if
oh,
I
yeah.
like can't make money? Like, what if I don't have clients? Like, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it really started in 2020. And in 2020, that's when my business first had its first quote unquote viral moment. I was really frustrated with Instagram bios and how they all just said, I help who do what. And I
Yeah.
thought there's got to be a better, more fun way to express your personality and make this more fun. So I was equating that formulaic bio to salt and pepper. I was like, it's so salt and pepper. Like, I want it to be more fun.
Yeah.
So I called it chili lime. And I was like, oh, I'm going to do this whole like chili lime challenge. And I really just taught people how to write a really fun and engaging bio that people would see it, click, connect, and start a conversation. And then, of course, the conversation led to sales. And that chili lime challenge, I realized I needed something on the back end of that, like host a free challenge and sell what. So then I hosted the Chili Lime Lab, which was a copywriting program all about making your writing more interesting and like a flavors taste sensation, making it spicy and fun. And ironically, I had a business coach tell me that's a terrible name, like terrible idea. Nobody's going to resonate with that. Nobody's going to get it. They're going to be like, chili lime, what? I don't understand. And it's
Yeah.
going to hurt my sales. I
Yeah.
found the exact opposite to be true. And so, of course, because we've worked together, we've talked about this, like it's that
Yeah.
moment where you realize like, oh, it opens a door. It opens the loop where you're like, what is Chili Lime Challenge? Everyone's talking about what's the Chili Lime Lab. People keep saying this. Why is this coming up? And it makes people more interested in what it is. And then that gives you the opportunity to, of course, open the conversations and start talking about what it is. So at that point, I thought, okay, this is really an interesting phenomenon that I've
Yeah.
discovered is that the whole clear versus clever thing is just complete and utter. Can I curse on this podcast? Great. Perfect. It's just total
Well,
BS.
crap.
Yeah. It's just like total, it's not true.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to naming. And there are several reasons for that, of course, being trademarks and legalities and things like that, but
Yeah.
also in just piquing people's curiosity. And so from there, that's when I started to think, okay, I'm going to start playing around a little bit more with this. And I did more
Yeah.
copywriting courses and they all had fun names. And then I taught a naming workshop and people loved it. And it was the same thing. But yes, you are absolutely correct in that some people had resistance. Oh my gosh, if I name it the creative thing, people aren't going to get it. And that did also rub off on me. Okay, how can I make my entire brand something that people have such an innate resistance to? So it took me a while. I was just naming for my copy clients when they would come to me like, okay, we're writing my sales page, but I don't really like the name of the program or I don't like the name of my framework. So I started trickling naming into that. And every so often I would host the naming workshop again. And then I just decided, you know what, this is the most fun for me. It's
Yeah.
really rewarding. I enjoy it. I'm good at it. So then I just decided to screw it. I'm going to go all in. I'm going to do the naming thing.
I love that so much. And I love that it was a combination too of not just this is working really well for my clients, but also something that you're passionate about. And I'm a big advocate for not just going into it because of the money of it and like how much money that you can make or everyone else is doing it. But it's like, for me, I don't think I even know one other person that's doing what you're doing, which I think is so, so cool. And you're just like, hey,
Yeah.
this is what I want to do. I'm good at doing it. I'm passionate about it. This is really fun for me. Let me dive into this. I love that so freaking much. Thank you for sharing. I want
Yeah.
to touch on something that you talked about a little bit more. You talked about how I would say normally in the naming space, people say clear is better than clever. Can you just talk a little bit more about that in the sense of what are like the risks and rewards associated with choosing like a clever name over a clear name? Because I think, like you were saying, taught, especially in the online space, of like, make sure it's clear, make sure it's clear, make sure it's clear. And there is a time and a place for that. But I do agree with you when it comes to naming, where and actually, when you have that clever name, it opens up a pathway to talk about things. So, can you talk a little bit more about the risks and rewards there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are different rules too when it comes to naming your brand versus naming your product versus naming your podcast and all of those different things. But for the most part, when I'm talking about naming, I'm talking about naming a company or a brand.
Yeah.
So, especially with a company or a brand, if you are just absolutely on the nose, very descriptive, very clear in what it is, first things first, you're definitely going to run into trademark issues. Like the clear
Yeah.
name, the one that's on the nose is already taken. Think about brands like Whole Foods. That is so on the nose.
Yeah.
No one can ever compete with that. But they did it first. And so unless you're first, that's not going to be an option. But when it
Yeah.
comes to the creativity part of it all and being a little bit more clever, one, you're going to have so many more opportunities, like I said, like you said, to start the conversation and make it more about the story, tell a deeper, more meaningful reality of what they can expect with the brand. Because ultimately, like, it's something that needs to be experienced.
Yeah.
So when you have a clever brand name, for example, my brand is called 26 and then some. And it wasn't always called that. I worked under my name for a really long time. But one, having an actual brand name makes it sellable. And two, it does give you the opportunity to explain that. I love when people say, what is 26 and then some? And I'm wearing my like letter shirt today because that's exactly what I wanted. That's my intent. My
Yeah. I
intent
love
is for you to ask and wonder what it's about so I can explain that no matter what you're doing, work how you work with me, whether that's copy, whether that's naming, it's all me just rearranging the same 26 letters.
I love that so much. When I initially found you, which was a few months ago, and it was through someone else who had just done naming with you as one of your clients, they talked about you on their Instagram stories and they tagged your Instagram handle. I was like, what? And I clicked on it and I was like, 26 and then some. I'm like, what? I was just so intrigued. And I remember going to your website and reading about it. And I was just like, oh my gosh, it is absolutely genius. And it is such a great conversation starter. But something that comes up for me is, and maybe this isn't even something that you think about, but are you ever thinking about like, how do you balance clarity and creativity when it comes to developing a name?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, always we start with developing the criteria first because every client's criteria is going to be a little bit different. Some people, they want to err on the side of caution. Oh, maybe they aren't intending to be the face of the brand. So, they don't want to have to explain the story over and over again. Maybe they just want it to sit there and people just get it. And so, that it depends client to client. When you're balancing the clarity and creativity, one, you do have to establish what those criteria are going to be per the brand, but
Yeah.
also you have to remember that context is always there. The name is never just sitting out by itself. You have the context of your website copy, your visuals, your images, the way other people are describing it, the products
Mm,
themselves. There's
yeah.
always something else that's going to add that flavor and texture to the name to make you realize, oh, there's something more that I want to investigate, or that click, oh, I get it moment.
Yeah. I love that. Something that was coming up for me is you were talking about how when it comes to cleverness, you were saying that in relation to a brand name, but you did also mention that it's a little bit different when it comes to naming a podcast, naming a course, naming a product. So there are a lot of listeners who are in the digital product based space. So they have online courses and memberships, but there's also a lot of product based businesses who listen as well.
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit more about it, just like brief like overview strategy when it comes to naming like a podcast versus like a digital product such as a course versus like a physical product versus a brand? Like, what are you thinking about? What are the main things that you're thinking about when it comes to naming each of those things, because they are very different?
Yeah, yeah. The biggest thing that comes up for me when I'm thinking about brand versus product is the brand has typically this overarching concept, or in my world, I call it conceptual positioning. It's basically like world building. So,
Yeah.
an umbrella theme, and then everything under that can fit into that theme. So, when I was talking about the chili lime thing before, I had
Yeah.
my chili lime challenge, and then there was the chili lime lab, and then I had another course called Personality Without Preservatives, and it was all around the concept of canned copy, quote
Yeah.
unquote, and how you can add flavor and make it your own, make it delicious with just starting out with something that's already templated, i.e., canned. So that was my overarching theme. And that's what brands have, whereas products may not necessarily have that. So
Yeah.
if you're starting with, say, a podcast may completely stand alone. Sometimes I recommend for podcasts, depending on how well known the person is, or if this is a new thing, if it's a private podcast, if it's a public podcast.
Yeah.
Most of the time, a podcast is going to be like that first initial touch point. Like someone
Yeah.
happens upon the podcast, they hear somebody else they like, and then they discover that podcast because they're being interviewed. In that case, you may decide the criteria you want to land on for naming that brand is going to be more about, okay, maybe it should be a little bit more clear in that this is the first time they're going to experience me, and
Okay.
then we can dive more into the brand, the what's all underneath, the personality, the tonality, the humor, and all that fun stuff. But that's the biggest thing I would say between brand versus product slash podcast.
I love that. So the brand is more of the big picture idea, whereas like the product is more micro focused, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And I would also say, too, this is just so nuanced, but when you're talking about the product, let's say it's like a beauty brand or something, and they have hero products. The hero product, I probably would put in the same category, under importance anyway, as the brand itself. I
Yeah.
worked with a beauty brand, and their brand theme was like travel and being on the go.
Yeah.
So all of the naming conventions for both the products themselves and the shades of makeup all had to fit that convention. So
Yeah.
it's still the product, and it still has a little bit different rules than the brand itself, but it also works under the same umbrella. So it's also a conversation of, yeah, is this a one-off digital product, or is this going to be part of a cohesive suite?
Okay, okay. When you say hero product, can you break that down for someone who's never heard that terminology before? What does a hero product mean?
Yeah, it's like the number one thing you think of when you think of that brand. I'm trying to think. Band-Aid, maybe. Band-Aid, their number one product is probably the bandage itself, but they might also, I don't know, but they probably also sell like gauze or
Yeah.
like a type of Neosporin type stuff.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you're saying that sometimes the hero product will cohesively integrate with the brand name, or sometimes the entire suite will, which in your case, when you're talking about chili lime, all of your products integrated with the
Right.
brand itself. Something that comes up for me here is, are you ever afraid, or do you ever have clients that get afraid of like diving that deep into a name? Like for you, when it came to chili lime, where you're like, what if I do chili lime for, this program, and then I sprinkle, the chili lime theme into all my other offers and it doesn't work out? Do you ever have that fear, or have clients have that fear around going that in depth into a theme?
Absolutely. And I think that's where the messaging and positioning really comes into play.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, too, when brands are excited to name something, they're not thinking so far ahead. And
Yeah.
if you can't think that far ahead, then that's where you have made the name something that pigeonholes you and you won't be able to grow in the future. So I'll example a brand I was working with recently. They are I'm trying to think of how much I can say. Sunless tanning products is what they do. And so I gave them a whole list of names pertaining to sunless tanning.
Yeah.
And then after they saw the initial list of names, they were like, oh, I think in the future we also want to create swimwear. And I'm like, okay, so this changes every single one of these names
Yeah.
because it now the positioning and the messaging has changed. We're no longer talking about a singular product and a singular focus.
Yeah.
Now we have to think big picture. We have to think about the umbrella.
Okay. 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 Can you talk a little bit more about the psychology impact of a name that it can have on a consumer? Because like you were saying with sunless tanning and then implementing, did you say swimsuits, is that what you
Mhm.
said? So those are two different products, and so what are you thinking about, like when it comes to psychology of the impact of the name versus like when you were talking about, okay, the name totally changes if it's a sunless tanner versus
Mhm.
if we're adding in the addition of swimwear?
Yeah. I think you have to think about the through line. What is the through line? What is that feeling? That goes back to, again, like the messaging. So for them, confidence was the through line. Like you feel great. They wanted people to feel great in a swimsuit and great with a tan.
Yeah.
So that became the through line. And when you think about the psychology of that, then you have to start peeling back the layers. As you with any sort of marketing or copywriting or sales and business, you have to think about the layers of, okay, if they're feeling this way, it might be because of this. And then how do we speak to that feeling? And then how do we speak to that feeling? And it just gets deeper and deeper. But also, too, with the psychology, you have to think about the tonality because everything is perceived a little bit differently. And it especially depends on like where they are when they receive that. So that becomes a conversation of, okay, are they going to find this product in stores? Are they going to find this product through influencers? Is it going to be just more gate kept, for lack of a better word? Is it going to be
Yeah.
like more an internet based product, or are they going to experience it in the wild? So then you have to think about all of those little nuanced things about where is it going to be? How are they going to find it? How are they feeling when they find it? What's it surrounded by? You think about, this is a terrible example, but the bread aisle.
Yeah.
It's still the same product. Most of them are the exact same, have the same ingredients, but
Yeah.
there's a difference between like Sunbeam versus Dave's Killer Bread.
Yeah.
Or perfect example, when we're talking about water, you have LaCroix and you have Liquid Death.
Yeah.
Like the psychology of those is completely different,
Yeah.
even though they are on the same aisle, it's the same product, and there's not much different between them. But it goes back to their messaging, their positioning, who they're talking to, the tonality of the brand. So naming really is both an art and a science because you can't just forget all of the like psychological things to it. You can't just call it water.
Yeah.
It's never just water. There's always more context, and that context comes in the flavor, for lack of a better word, of the psychology and the linguistics and the brand and all that.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit more about linguistics? I feel like this is like the nitty gritty
Yeah.
aspect of naming. I love it. Phonetics, syllable structure, cultural connotations, that all plays a role in the effect
Yeah.
of a name. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So the easiest way to talk about this is to talk about, I'm sure people have heard of this before, the Booba Kiki effect. Have you heard of this?
I haven't.
The Booba Kiki effect is when they basically tell people to listen to those two words, Booba and Kiki, and associate them with shapes. And you have the round shapes and you have like spiky shapes. What are you going to choose? Are you going to call the round one Kiki, or are you going to call the round one Booba?
Booba is
Booba.
what I
They're
would say. Yeah.
Yeah, and everybody does that.
Yeah.
It's one of those like weird phenomenons, but also because it has a certain sound, and sounds are
Yeah.
really important when it comes to naming. This is like more of the science of it.
Yeah.
Same things with TikTok, has a different sound, it has a different feeling than say got very soft sounds, and it
Yeah.
doesn't have the same connotation as TikTok, which has that kiki effect. You think of spiky, it has edges.
Yeah.
So that's just something that's really fun. The G sound is more of a tough sound. So you think about Gorilla Glue.
Yeah.
It's a perfect example. Like it's tough, it has the image. And that's the other fun thing too about names is when the name fits the product and it fits the purpose of the product, then you can also use the name to inform the rest of it. So the branding, the images,
Yeah.
the packaging, all of that is also informed by the name. Like it's the baseline. But anyway, about the linguistics, it's just the sounds that That's how it rolls off the tongue. When people can't say they can't quite put the finger on why it's not the right name, it's probably the way it feels linguistically.
Okay, I love that. I love that. What are some methods that you use to come up with names that are effective and innovative, encompassing all the things that we've talked about, from the psychology to the linguistics to, the cultural connotations, all of this? Like, how can you, there's a lot of things that are going
Yeah.
on. Like, what are your go-to methods when it comes
Yeah.
to naming?
So I always, with my company being 26 and then some and all about the alphabet, I think about it. I always say I turn ABCs into OMGs. And ABCs, that the ABC part is like my process. So I think about the angle. How is it going to be positioned? That's all things to do with the A. I have to have all this information first while we're developing the criteria for what the name needs to be like. Then we go into the fun strategies and the ideating and all that. So
Yeah,
A would be the angle, B is the brand. What do we need to know about the tone, about the people who are buying it? C, is there a concept? Is there a core concept that we're tying everything to? So once I have those, then I can get into developing the criteria. My criteria, regardless of the client's criteria, this is my baseline. It has to be original. We're not going to copy anything that sounds like something else.
yeah,
It has to be memorable. And there's memorable, I always test and say, okay, if I stop sharing my screen while I'm showing you the list of names I've come up with, if I stop sharing my screen, which ones do you remember? And then G is the growth potential. Does it allow for sister products or a product suite in the future? Or is this going to be something that you're really pigeonholed to? And maybe you want to be. So
yeah,
those are like the baselines. And then, so when it's a question of criteria, we have to think about everybody has different criteria. So some people want it to be something that can be easily spelled. Some people want it to be a little bit more ephemeral or relating to like today's culture.
yeah,
When I think about ephemeral, I think about house, HAUS. It's everywhere. Everybody
yeah,
seems to love having house in things, or
yeah.
collective. Collective is another really popular one. Some people care about that is part of their criteria. And once we've developed the criteria and we've agreed, okay, this is what we're working for, this is what's going to work with the brand, then we get into the fun part. And some of those strategies could be, one of my favorites and how I name my company is babies and boomers. I think, like, how do you explain what you do to a baby and to a boomer? And what would be the distinguishing factors between those? So for me, 8 years of copywriting, and people still say copywriting, oh, like trademarks. Oh, is it lawyer stuff? No, it's copywriting with a W.
Yeah.
And then I just got tired of saying, no, copywriting with a W and 25 other letters. And I was like, ooh, 25 other letters plus the W. Oh, that's 26 letters of the alphabet.
Yeah.
So you can see how all these wheels start turning. Same thing with babies. Like, how would I explain copywriting to a baby? I take letters and I arrange them into words to make you buy things, period.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one of the fun ones that I like to do, is like, how can I make this so simple that an infant could figure it out, but also like a boomer who's using the computer and navigating the internet and having trouble. So that's one of them. And another one would be metaphors. So like the whole chili lime thing would be a metaphor. Of
Yeah.
course, you always have like alliteration. A lot of people like Gorilla Glue, TikTok, like all of that's alliterative. I guess really it starts with, I do a lot of research into the meaning of it. And then I can go down all those different rabbit holes and find words. And one of the fun things that I've actually used before when I've come up with names for clients is I will just open a book near me and skim the page for fun words and kind of use the thesaurus and just go down the rabbit hole of, oh, that's a really interesting word. How could I use that? And then try to find ways to assign new meaning to it. That's another really effective way to name things. Think about Apple. It's one of the most popular brands in the world. And you wouldn't think Apple when you
Yeah.
think technology, it's a food.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when you assign new meaning to it, that makes it exciting and also more trademarkable.
I love that. Wow. There was a lot
Yeah.
there. I love that so much. I am so curious to know, is it, when I think of chili lime and I think of your brand name, and these are like so freaking creative. When I like hear you say these things, I'm like, that is like so genius. Like the chili lime, and you're talking about like canned, and you talked about how you don't want it to be salt and pepper. I'm just like mind blown. I'm like, that is so genius. How much time did it take you to come upon that? Was that like, oh, I need a name, and then like weeks or like months later, like, oh, here's this name? Or was it like, did you sit down at your computer or at the thesaurus or with the book and you started looking at what did that whole process look like just specifically for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Naming my company took a little bit longer, but with the chili lime thing, honestly, I was just in a rage. I was in a fury of, oh my gosh, all this coffee is so salt and pepper. It's so boring. It's so vanilla. And
Yeah.
I thought, what is the opposite of that? Something fun, something exciting. And I just thought, oh, like chili lime. That is the polar opposite to salt and pepper. And that's what
Yeah.
I wanted. And then with it being easy, that's where the psychology and the linguistics and stuff comes into play a little bit, because chili lime is the part that's, wait, what does that have to do with copy? But then
Yeah.
I add the challenge or I add lab and it has that alliterative effect. And now you're like, ooh, wait, that's
Mhm.
interesting.
Okay.
So I wouldn't have called it like chili lime copywriting does not have the same ring as
Yeah.
chili lime challenge or chili lime lab.
Yeah.
I used to have a newspaper that I sent out, and it was a physical product because one of the things that I noticed about my clients is they wanted to learn copywriting, but they didn't always put it into practice. It was hard to carve out the time to learn. And
Yeah.
so I wanted something to be something they received physically
Yeah.
and they could actually put pen to paper and try things out. And so I had this newspaper and I called it Hard Copy. And that was a really fun name. It's probably one of my favorites that I've ever come up with. And I always think about bringing it out of retirement because I just love it. But people had this idea that copy was hard. And so
Yeah.
I wanted to call it out like hard copy, but it's also a physical hard copy. And it gave them that space to put their practice in, like actually do it.
That's just you giving a name a new meaning. Like exactly what you're saying with Apple. I love that.
Right. That one I remember it probably took me a couple hours because I was like going down all these different rabbit holes of this is what I want it to mean. I always start with a meaning. Then that's the A piece again, the angle.
Yeah.
Always start with that. And so that one, yeah, I just went down so many different rabbit holes. That's the fun thing about naming. Like I happen upon so many weird historical things, Greek mythological things
Yeah.
on the internet, just looking for different things that are interesting that I could assign new meaning to.
Do you use AI at all to help you? I'm curious.
Yeah, I love this question. I have tried AI for naming just for
Okay.
fun,
Yeah.
and it's disgusting. Like the results are so terrible. Even feeding it my exact creative briefs that I use with clients, and
Yeah.
even with all of my naming prowess and what I've learned over the years with
Yeah.
clients, I still cannot get it to generate anything worth a crap. And the
Interesting.
thing too is it's not trademarkable. If you use AF for a name, like you
Yeah.
just have to roll with it. And for some people, they may not want to trademark it. If it's a product that you're just testing out, maybe it's in beta, you don't know if you're going to keep it, then that may be fine for you. But I cannot get it to come up with names that are worth anything to save my life. And I was teaching a naming workshop. I partnered with a trademark attorney and we co-taught a naming workshop. And I did the fun stuff and she did the fine print. It was very fun. But part of my email sequence, so as I was like writing out all the marketing emails, I used ChatGPT and I fed it all of the criteria for naming my company.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see what it would name my company.
Yeah.
And it was like cryptic 26 or like alphabet letters. Like it was so bad.
Yeah.
And so I have thought about doing like a personal challenge, like seeing how many days it would take for ChatGPT to arrive at my company name, knowing full well it won't. I just think it would be fun, like a
Yeah.
social media series, like day one of trying to get anything good out of ChatGPT.
Yes. And why do you think that is? Do you think it just doesn't have the creative brain to put two and two together? It's more of a salt and pepper type of result, or I don't know. I'm just curious if you have any theories around that.
My theory is it doesn't think abstractly. If
Okay.
you tell it to be creative or try something out of the box, it might come up with something that's like cute or cheeky.
Yeah.
And you have to have a pretty in depth understanding of tone words to be able to tell it and dial in exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah.
But I think it's more of the abstract nature of it doesn't think metaphorically. It doesn't think. It doesn't think in the same way that people do. And
Yeah.
that's hard to teach. Not admittedly, if I start If we were to try to name your company right now in real time, who knows where we would end up.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
and that's just, yeah, I think that's really what it is when it comes to AI. It's not hooking things that don't go together.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And to me, I think of all the things that you've named and what you have created and what you have built is 100% like it's a skill set. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't have that skill set, which is why I hired you in the first place. Because I'm like, someone else out there has that skill set and I'm going to hand over my money because that is what you're good at. And
Yeah.
I think if I can't even figure out how to learn that skill set myself, then like, how is AI going to know how to do that? So
Yeah.
I'm just curious to hear your theory on that. I would love to know, do you do any, I think you touched on this, do you do any sort of like market research when it comes to your naming process? Like, how do you know that the name that you come up with is going to like really land and resonate with your client's audience?
Mm-hmm. That is very interesting because there's two ways that I could take this conversation. One way is, of course, there is some sort of competitive research just to make sure that I'm not picking names that are already out there.
Yeah.
The other way, though, is it's almost like with certain clients, depending on their criteria and what they're
Yeah.
open to, I almost want to challenge them to think, okay, if we don't look at any of your competitors, how can we make sure your name is unique enough? And then we craft a story to make it make sense. And
Mm.
so it's because nobody wants to maybe, thankfully, you are generous enough to say, yeah, I hired you. But a lot of people are like, yeah, I don't want to just let my brand story be like, oh, I hired a girl to do it. A lot of people, of course, want the buy in. So part of the naming process is like, when I give them a list of names, I'm also giving them a rationale and a story behind it. Like, here's how you can sell this.
Yeah.
And that's really important because, like I said, nobody wants to be like, oh, I hired somebody to do it. So that's part of it when you're thinking about making sure it's going to resonate with people is you craft the story around the name because the name came from a story.
Yeah.
And it might not be the same story. You may have a more vulnerable story, a story that you want to keep closer to your heart that you tell me and you're like, okay, this is what I want the name to mean. It may be more personal. So maybe the name comes from, I know my parents' neighborhood was named after their daughter or something. Like maybe that's a little bit more protected and you don't want that to be the brand story. So then my job also becomes, okay, what do we call it? How do we tell people that this is the name and this is why?
Do you recommend having a tagline attached to the name, or do you think that a tagline isn't enough and it needs to be a story, or does it depend on what you're naming, like a brand versus a product?
It always depends. But I love taglines because they do add that additional context. Because when you have a name just sitting out there by itself,
Yeah.
you need the context.
Yeah.
And the name is the thing that gets passed around more than anything else when you're talking word of mouth, when you're talking about just like you see it somewhere. So having a tagline or just even a few descriptor words, that is going to help with the context. But I won't say it's always like a make or break. Like the tagline, if you don't have a tagline, it's not going to kill the name.
Yeah. Can you give some examples of like good taglines, like the name plus the tagline, just so listeners can like pair the two things together? Did Chili Lime have like a tagline with it? Or especially for these more creative names, like what is a good tagline? And it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be Chili Lime, but just like any client examples or anything that you can give.
That's a really good question. So let me think about. I know the Chili Lime one for the Chili Lime Lab, which was the website copywriting program. I didn't have a tagline per se, but I did have a one line description. I
Yeah.
just said, write spicier website copy in 4 weeks. It was
Mm,
just, that was the clearest part about it. If
yeah.
the name is, and that's where you have to balance. If the name is going to be a little more clever, then your description line or tagline might need to be a little bit more clear, a little more on the nose. But when you think about like taglines that you experience in the real world, they
Yeah.
don't necessarily go with the name. So like Nike, just do it. Everyone knows it, but that doesn't help clarify anything about the name.
Yeah.
And most people haven't done the research into why Nike is called Nike. And it wasn't always called Nike. I don't remember the original name, but it was something terrible. But Nike is like a Greek goddess, I think. That's where it came from. But you wouldn't get that from just do it.
Yeah.
So the tagline then becomes subjective. Do you need it? Do you not need it?
Is there any sort of advice you would give specifically for digital products? Because there are a lot of listeners who are in the digital product space. Is there anything specific when it comes to naming and taglines that you would give advice on?
Yes. Start with a tagline, because the tagline is going to help you conceptualize what it actually is that you're wanting people to get out of it. And from there, you can start to think metaphorically or a little bit more abstractly about the name. So, for example, if the product is just, you give me a product, maybe it's an Instagram course.
Yeah.
If it's an Instagram course, then what do you want to teach people about Instagram? Is it more about the profile? Is it more about engagement and using Instagram and like connecting with people? Is it more about the content itself? Once you have pared down like what it is you're actually going to be teaching, or if they're going to get out of the product, then you can reverse engineer and think, okay, if it's about content, then the tagline should be about content, and maybe the name can speak to something they want out of having good content. Is it how they want to be perceived? Maybe it opens the doors for brand partnerships or affiliates or influencer type opportunities. So I would say the biggest thing is starting with the angle, that ABC thing.
Yeah.
So what is the angle first and foremost? And then you can think, how do I reverse engineer and make the name allude to that without being directly on the nose?
Yes, I love that. My last question around naming, and this is more like I'm looking more so for a high arching overview look, like if we're like looking like big picture. Can you walk us through a process from like initial brainstorming to like final selection of a name where it's you talked about ABC, like obviously that's like probably the very first thing to go to. And then what is step two? What is step three? All the way down until like you're selecting the final name. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it starts, yes, with ABC. We develop first what is the whole purpose of it. And I do this live. I like to do the creative brief part live so we can ask follow-up questions in real time and I can just get deeper and deeper. It's
Yeah.
hard when you have a questionnaire because you may leave things out or you might have epiphanies later. So I like to do this in real time so we can develop the criteria, and you're finding the angle, and then we're talking about the brand and who's going to be buying it and where they're going to see it and all that stuff. Then we talk about the concept. What is the purpose of it? Is it going to be something that when I say concept, I don't always mean theme, but I also mean more of like the meaning of it, the
Yeah.
message behind it, and how it fits into what's already out there, what
Yeah.
distinguishes it from other things. So having the ABC, then we get into the criteria. Then I squirrel away and come up with a list of names. And from there, I present the names to the client first without context, just a list of names to see like what's memorable. And then I provide the rationale. So you'll see the list of names. I'll let you read them for a sec. And then I'll say, okay, here are some of my top ones. And this is why. And then I give the rationale. And then at that point, we just pare down the ones that are absolute no's. And maybe it's a conversation of, I like the rationale for this one, but I didn't like the name for this one. I prefer the
Yeah.
name for this one. And then it's just like retrofitting. Like, how do we make this story that you liked best for this one fit this name that you liked?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that's what's so important about having the criteria and making sure that it's objective, because naming can be so subjective. Like naming your kids, everybody has an opinion.
Yeah.
Your opinion and my opinion could be different opinions.
Yeah.
So developing the criteria, we always come back to that criteria so we can make sure we're looking at it objectively to say, this is a good name because it fits this. And that would be how you pare it down. And then from there, once we have the top maybe 3 to 5, then I'll look at like I can't see everything a trademark attorney can on my end,
Yeah.
but then I'll just make sure preliminarily that I don't see any trademark conflicts. And then we'll talk about like the domain. I always tell people not to worry about if the domain is taken, because you can always add a word before it or a word after it, especially for like products. If it's t-shirts, whatever, you can shop t-shirts.com.
Yeah.
It's easy.
Yeah.
So at that point, then you start adding in all those little things. Once you have the name decided on and you think you're clear trademark, then you would go on. I always tell people like actually hire a trademark attorney to double check, make sure. And then we can get into the conversation of like, how do you build out the name further? How do you build out the brand further with the name as like that foundational piece? So then it's the tagline. Then it's what kind of words are you using? How's your copy sound to support the name and all that?
I love that so much. So juicy. Thank you so much for sharing. Like I said at the beginning, I think what you're doing is absolutely fantabulous. And I'm so grateful for the time that you took to be able to share with all of us on the podcast today. My very final question for you is if you could go back to day one of your journey and give yourself one piece of advice, what would it be?
It would be not be so reluctant to go all in on naming from the beginning.
Mm,
It would, because I've had the most fun with naming,
yeah.
and my clients have had, it's the more immediate satisfaction.
Yeah.
Naming, it's so much more fun. So that would be my advice.
I love that. And where can people find you if they want support with naming their online course or their membership or their challenge or their product or their brand? Like, where can people find you and what services do you offer?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. It's just my name, Katie Pannell, two N's, two L's. And then on my website, I have different packages for naming both brands and naming products and things that are a little more one off. I also have a preferential treatment package, which is more like copywriting and naming, and it's the whole shebang.
Yeah.
There's a workshop. You can get the replay of that workshop I mentioned where I was teaching with the trademark attorney. That is on my website if you want to try taking a stab at naming for yourself, or I am available to do it for you.
I love that so much. I can attest Katie is amazing. Go hire her for all of your naming needs. Thank you again, Katie, for being here. I appreciate you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was fun.